So welcome to the Avalanche Skills Training course hosted by the University of Calgary Outdoor Centre. I'll be your host. My name is Nathan Reeves. So I'm an internationally qualified mountain guide and I've been guiding for around about 12 years, both here in Canada and in Europe. I've got extensive experience in delivering avalanche education throughout that period. So to start us off with, we're going to have a little look at the goals of the AST1 course. So by the end of this course, you should be able to complete a backcountry trip using all available resources, addressing the human factors and decision making, identify avalanche terrain and be able to describe avalanche formation and release using basic terminology, understand avalanche forecasts with the avalanche dangers and problems that are present, utilize the evaluator tool to assess avalanche slopes. So the evaluator tool is a tool that we're going to give to you on your field day, but also we're going to talk about it and go through a few exercises in the coming presentations. So describe techniques to minimize risk when traveling the backcountry, including group management, and demonstrate basic companion rescue. So we won't go too detailed into companion rescue on the virtual portion of the course, but as we move into the field day, we're going to cover companion rescue in depth. So you'll definitely go away at the end of that day being able to feel comfortable and confident that you can rescue one of your friends if they do get caught in an avalanche. And then it's important that we understand the limits of our training. So we'll kind of be talking about what where this course is going to take you and what kind of things you can expect whilst we're on the virtual part and also whilst we're out in the field. So over the past sort of 10 to 15 years, there's been a real kind of resurgence of individuals and groups going into the backcountry during the winter. And some of that's down to the equipment has become a lot easier to obtain. And the equipment has also gone through a massive sort of evolution. So, a lot of companies that started out building backcountry, mainly bindings and boots, so companies such as Dynafit, their patents ran out in the early 2000s. So what that meant was there was a lot of competition from other brands. So because there's a lot of competition, there's a lot more equipment that's available. And also, with the sort of development of new kind of techniques in manufacturing and the way that these products can be easily built and cheaply has meant there's a lot of equipment that's available on the market. But also there's a lot more information out there. So back in the kind of when I first started out in the early 2000s, information was a little bit scarce on especially backcountry ski touring. You kind of had to know people that knew an area. Now we've got all of these resources such as guidebooks, online resources such as FatMap, and different mapping apps, and also kind of access to better avalanche forecasts that are easier to use and easier to understand. So you can kind of just go onto Avalanche Canada and get a really in-depth report on what's going to be happening in the next period. But also on there, one of the things we're going to talk about is the Mountain Information Network. So individuals that have been out ski touring or ski mountaineering, sledding, ice climbing in a particular area can write a report about their day and what the conditions were that they expected, and they can just upload that report onto Avalanche Canada. And then you can click on it and say, right, yeah, that's where I was thinking about going tomorrow or the day after. Oh, right, yeah, I see that there's a real problem with, say depth hole within the snowpack or something that you need to pay particular attention to, something that you might not have been aware of unless you've gone out there yourself and, dug around and maybe dug a snow pit. So all of these sort of developments in equipment and sort of online resources has led to a real kind of boom in backcountry activities. So last winter, with people not being able to kind of get away to the normal holiday retreats, we're spending more time in the back garden. So for us, our back garden is Rocky Mountains, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of people out and about, probably plus 30, 40% on previous years, which means it's getting busier. Because it's getting busier, we need to be aware of other users and how that affects us and our group, okay, and how your group affects other people. Moving forward, I suspect it's, with equipment being so easily and readily available, there's going to be more and more people getting into the backcountry. So kind of backcountry skiing isn't just limited to the winter months. So you've got a couple of chaps here that like they're having a right laugh out on a glacier in the summer months in July and August. So I'm not going to lie to you, that snowpack on the left there doesn't look like it'd be fun to ski, especially first thing in the morning, just like it'd be corrugated tin. But they're out there, they're doing it, and they're on skis. So because there's snow on the ground, all the way through the summer months, you still have to be aware of avalanches occurring in those summer months. So this information is not just going to serve you well for your backcountry experiences here in the winter, but also in the summer months. So this is the kind of thing that hopefully we're all looking at doing. So whether it's on skis, sledding, if you're going ice climbing and it's like this, you're going to be walking up to your chest to get to where you need to be. But we're hoping to be skiing in some nice, deep, fresh powder. A couple of things to note from this picture, even though it does look like that person's having a fantastic time, is firstly, just look at the angle of the slope. So the angle of the slope looks like it's easily more than 30 degrees. So 30 degrees is a number we're going to talk about quite a lot throughout your AST course. And it's something to just remember, that's the kind of threshold of almost where avalanches can occur and avalanches are less likely to occur. So I say less likely because as soon as there's any sort of snowpack on the ground, there is a chance of an avalanche, unless of course you're on a football pitch, which there probably isn't a chance of avalanching, but you get the idea. So in this particular picture, generally, you'd be skiing sort of deep snow, beautiful blue skies, but normally it would be after a storm. So all of that snow has got to come from somewhere. So it will have stormed quite heavily. So the first couple of days after a storm, clear blue skies, that's when people are kind of get that powder fever and they want to be out, sort of skiing the steep lines. But that's when you're at your most vulnerable. Okay, so just bear that in mind. All right. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. So I've got a few slides and of pictures here of people having a bit of fun, up to their chest in snow. Fantastic. Hopefully this is going to be the same this winter. Last winter was amazing. And there we go, having the time of their lives. So another reason that so many people are moving into the backcountry is because there's a lot more cabins that are being built. So here in Canada, there aren't as many mountain huts and cabins as there are in Europe, but they're becoming more and more. So this is the Lightning Strike cabin, which is up on the Kootenay Pass. You can access this lodge, easily up a track for about 3 kilometers of easy kind of walking on your skis or dragging a sled. To book this cabin for a family for a night is $120. So that is amazing value. But what it does, it puts you right in the backcountry. So all you need to do is step out of the cabin in the morning, put your boots on, put your skis or your board on, and off you go. You're in the backcountry, okay? But being said, you're straight in the backcountry. So there's a lot of risks to be aware of with avalanches. You're almost stepping out your door into avalanche terrain here. All right, so you don't necessarily get to have a look at the conditions as you drive into somewhere. But there's a lot more of these lodges being built. So more and more people are going to be moving into the backcountry because of the ease of access. And this picture is just a beautiful sort of mountain vista with someone looks like they're on a snowboard moving down the slope. And this is the sort of thing that realistically we're out there to enjoy, but we need to be able to do it safely. Okay. So I've got a little video here that hopefully will get you prepared for the winter, or if you've already been out skiing already, then get you even more psyched for it. So about 5 minutes long.
Some of the best things in life are found off the beaten path, and paradise isn't found alongside. If it were a few degrees colder, it would indeed be. Spend every moment we can with water sucked up into the atmosphere, and there at lightning strike. Or a few degrees warmer, it never gets closer. Snow in Antarctica to Alaska. If you don't do it this year, you'll only be 1 year older when you do. We snow riders are the most fortunate people on this planet Earth because we get to spend an endless winter on the side of a mountain somewhere on whatever we enjoy the most, sliding on something that never changes, yet is never the same. Something as simple as a blanket of snow.
So here I am recording this video in September, and it's a beautiful day outside. There's not a drop of snow on the ground, and I'm actually quite excited after watching that video. So hopefully here's a good winter. So obviously the downside of all of that fun, there's a little bit of responsibility from us, and that's that we need to be aware of avalanches, and that's why you're on this course. So this is just a picture of a snow mover moving, cutting a road through a blocked road that's been covered by an avalanche. So that's obviously the downside of kind of moving around in the backcountry. But with a little bit of education and a little bit of forethought, you can easily make your excursion safe. So I've got another couple of videos coming up shortly, but this next video is from a sledder that's been buried. So it's quite a long video, but we're actually just going to watch a little bit of it, and then I'm going to rewind it and just show you in slow motion what's going on and point a few things out for you. Okay.
I didn't think too much about it at first. I clambered out of the hole in the snow where I'd been buried. I traveled under the snow for over 1,000 feet at a speed estimated at 45 miles per hour. I came to rest with my right hand sticking out of the snow, my helmet ripped off, my mouth, nose, and ears packed with snow. Then everything turned gray.
Go! Oh God! Watch him! Watch him! Son of a! Watch him!
Okay, so I'm just going to pause the video there and just rewind it just a little bit and point a few things out for you. You might have already spotted them, but just in case you didn't. Okay, so firstly, you've got the chap going up on his snowmobile, and you notice that he's not the first person that's traveled up there. So there's already tracks there, which will lead us on to a further discussion later on about heuristics. So the tracks are already there, and you'll notice that he then moves on to a part of the slope that's untracked. Okay, and look where the avalanche starts off. Okay, so you can see the tracks. Okay, so that's where the next highest point was. I'm just going to pause it a second. So on this next bit, I just want you to pay attention across the ridge line, and I want you to pay attention around the rocks and also along this portion here. So this whole feature would be called either a ridge or a spur, but the snowpack over it is under tension. Okay, so let's just pay attention to that. Okay, so what you can see is all the way up the side of the ridge line, across the top, so across this spur, across the top of the ridge line, and then you can see it's gone all the way across and it's gone around the rocks. Okay, in this next section, I want you to pay attention to lower down the slope. You'll see a secondary avalanche starting off. Okay. So right here, you can see the secondary avalanche. So it actually sheared off before the impact of his sled. So what I'd say has happened is that the weight of all of this snow moving down has actually collapsed a weak layer within the snowpack, and then it's propagated down to the next weakest part of the snowpack, which is here. And pay attention how fast it starts. It starts off slow and then it builds up speed very quickly. We've seen the rest there. So luckily, fortunately for him, he managed to get rescued by his friends. So I've kind of just mentioned there about heuristic traps. Okay, so we are going to talk about these a little bit later on, but the ones we're most concerned about in the backcountry are, starting from the bottom left there, is commitment, acceptance, familiarity, social proof, tracks and scarcity, and the expert halo. Okay, so just keep those into the back of your mind, and we'll come back to them a little bit later on. So a decision-making challenge. The problem with perception of risk seems to be the ability to translate the abstract probabilities into personal life consequences. So this is, I'm no psychologist, okay, but this is human nature. We always err on the, the kind of, it'll never happen to me sort of things, it'll always happen to someone else. And you don't necessarily think that when you're a car parker on the side of the road on the Highway 93 North, that you're putting your ski boots on, you're getting your skis on, and that later that day, you're going to be digging your mates out of an avalanche. You don't necessarily link the two. You know it's a possibility, but being able to run the consequences and the aftermath of that through your mind, it's almost a kind of, it'll be okay, it won't happen. Unfortunately, it does happen, and you all know it happens. Kind of every year in the backcountry, there's at least 20 to 30 people die in North America, at least. I mean, in Europe, there's that number, maybe a few more, just because of the concentration of people in the mountains. So it does happen, and you just need to think about that, and just sort of if it doesn't feel right, and I'm going to come back to, I'll give you a couple of examples of when I've had to really pull back. If it doesn't feel right, you don't have to carry on. Okay, you can always turn around and go, oh, let's go and do something else, or let's go and drink coffee, which is always a good option. Okay, so there's a couple more videos here. So the first video is from a chap called Manuel Genswein. He's an avalanche expert from Switzerland, and he was one of the people that invented or helped to invent the Mammoet Barry-Vox transceiver, which is one of the first 3 antenna transceivers available on the market. So that's the market standard at the moment, is 3 antennas. And he's going to talk to you a little bit about sort of risk.
I'm Manuel Genswein from Switzerland. I work in the domain of snow and avalanches for 22 seasons. In the meantime, I have taught courses mainly for avalanche professionals in 29 countries. When I train mountain guides or rescuers, we always want to make them clear what they sacrifice by a certain risk tolerance level. And those ones active in this domain, they obviously have seen much more of what can happen because they lost a lot of close friends. I think as a skier or mountaineer, if you're not comfortable with the risk you would be taking by a certain descent in certain conditions, you obviously have to change the behavior. So either you ski another mountain today, or you simply choose a descent which is slightly less wind-loaded, slightly shallower terrain. So I think, what can you do to avoid skiing things which are bad risks? Because you only have an exciting life, but not the much better combination of an exciting and a long life. Let's say before your day out, you select a tour which is compatible with the participants and the conditions of the nature, then the case fatality rate is roughly 1 to 100,000. This is where you end up in the green range of the different risk management tools which are available today. This is such a low probability. You can easily think, oh, it's never me. But now, let's say you're an active ski tourer. You ski 50 days a year. We divide 100,000 by 50. Maybe we do it for 20 seasons. So the 1 to 2,000 divides by 20, and you end up 1 to 100. Now, not everybody stays in the green range of these different risk assessment systems. The more you push it, the more you maybe go down to 1 in 50 or even 1 in 25 or 1 in 10. You can look at your friends and you know, through the next 20 years of professional activity or very active recreational activity in this domain, 2 of us or 3 of us will probably not make it. The psychological feedback loop that above average risk behaviors are something you really shouldn't do are less clear. We have to find ways to make mountaineers and skiers realize that in despite of the fact that the consequence of their behavior is not immediate, doesn't mean at all that it's fairly realistic with this 1 in 100, 1 in 50, that it's as well one day them, and maybe it's tomorrow.
So quite a sobering thought video from there from Manuel Genswein. So one of the things that you need to bear in mind about the traveling in the backcountry is that it's a pretty wicked sort of schoolroom, if you like. So you don't really get a chance to practice and get it right. And a lot of the time you'll never know how close you came to being caught in an avalanche. So, you know, you can kind of go out into the backcountry, have a great day, ski some steep lines, you get back home, back to your car, you think, oh, I had a great day, you didn't do anything wrong. You know, we're back in one piece, didn't see any avalanches, perfect. You know, and what that does is it kind of makes you think, well, it must be the next time I go out, it'll be, I can do the same thing and get away with it. And get away with it is the point. So you've only got to get it wrong once, and you're going to be involved in a big avalanche, especially on the steeper, bigger slopes that you end up skiing. So when Manuel Genswein's talking about the green range of sort of ski tours, if you like, or you know, any mountaineering excursions in the winter, you know, realistically, we're talking about anything that would be under 30 degrees in steepness. So anything over 30 degrees, you are starting to push yourself into the, you know, the kind of amber, and then into the steeper it goes, into the red kind of sort of zone, if you like, where, you know, things are a little bit more uncertain. And you might find that, so some people will go out and they'll look for skiing big lines every time they go out. And it's got to be, you know, the most action-packed day they've ever had in their whole life every time they go out. The more and more you do that, the more and more chances are you are getting caught in an avalanche. So like for example, last winter, I spent the whole winter looking up at a couloir that I wanted to ski with a friend. And I actually didn't get to ski it in the end because, you know, the kind of last time I looked up there, I got a pair of binoculars and sort of had a spy at it from the road. There was an absolutely massive cornice at the top of this couloir. So I'd have to walk up the couloir, you know, climb up the couloir underneath this huge cornice, which is a ticking time bomb, and then ski back down it. You know, quite a steep couloir, easily more than 40 degrees. So then, of course, you've got the giant cornice above your head, and then you're skiing a really steep slope. So to get those conditions right, you know, you might be waiting all season. You might not get to ski it that season. But the fact of the matter is, it'll always be there. So I'm not going anywhere. I can always keep an eye on it, and when it's looking good, and I feel that conditions are right, I'll go and ski it. Okay, so don't be afraid of sort of saying, no, that's not happening. I'm going to go and do something else. Okay, just to give you an idea of, we're going to come back to this in a later presentation, but the steepest slope that you'll ever ski in a ski resort will be no more than 35 or 36 degrees. So just think about the steepest slope up at Lake Louise. You know, it wouldn't be any more than 35 degrees, and it feels really steep. So that's the kind of steepness we're talking. And you know, skiing, you don't need to ski that steep all the time. You can have just as much fun on slightly less of an angle, sort of 25 degrees, and still have the time of your life. Okay, but being a lot safer about it. So I've got another video coming up next from a chap. We're talking about the aftermath of, unfortunately, losing a friend, and about the the things that led up to that accident, and then sat back looking back at it in hindsight. Okay. Nope, that's manual again. It's fine again.
Yeah, this is some tricky stuff to talk about right now, because you can't, to armchair people's decision making in the mountains is probably the worst thing that can be done, because nobody really knows unless you're there. I started skiing in September this year, or that year. Dave showed up in I think end of December or January. So in September started skiing. The snowpack started pretty slow. The Hellbronner opened the 19th of November, so that offered a lot of access. So we were out skiing. I was out skiing for 2 months before all this, and it was okay. You could ski. There wasn't that much snow. It had snowed once in Chamonix. On the Italian side, it snowed a little bit more, but it was the same scenario where we had a little bit of snow early season, and then high pressure for 2 months, which ultimately I left town. So I keep tabs on the winter, and it's still dry. So in Chamonix, it's been 3 months almost without no snow, on top of a layer that had been frozen. The day before I fly back, it snows over 1 meter, and it hasn't snowed for a month and a half. I'm like, oh, it's going to be super dangerous. For Dave, it was the day off. The night before they called down to come down and have some beers, and we're going to go ski in Italy. No hurry, nothing gnarly, just go ski a family powder run, and didn't work out that way. On the Chamonix side was before we didn't even need the guides, but Miles Smart and some other mountain guides were up digging on the Plan d'Aiguille side. So at 2,000 meters, we basically had a continental snowpack that was, triggering anywhere. We were having the sort of avalanches that we don't have in Chamonix. Whether you take that into account, that was more on the Chamonix side, and he died on the Italian side. But was he late? He skied it. It was after 11 when he skied. It was windy, but after Dave had skied, there was 2 groups of mountain guides with clients behind. So, decision-making process, nobody was making a good decision that day. Or if nothing would have happened, no one would have said anything. It's like the best powder run one of the best powder runs on the Hellbronner. It's very far from if you're to classify extreme, but now in Chamonix, it doesn't even, it doesn't matter if it's extreme or not extreme. Either way can get you. There aren't any more safe decision makings in particularly this winter, that showed that to a lot of people. A lot of people who have just gotten into whatever the extreme skiing, and to have somebody die in an avalanche that wasn't first tracks, wasn't even that extreme, that made everybody realize that, yeah, you can make all the decisions, but the ultimate decision is whether you're going to go or not. Probably about 5 years ago, I felt like Superman. I felt like I had all the answers, and a lot of people were asking me, and I really did believe that I had beaten the system. The guides have a Munter thing. They have an actual risk numerical equation that can tell you whether it's safe or not. But if you actually applied those numbers to any given day when it's in any sort of snow or wind, you would never go skiing. You would never see a mountain guide out there skiing. Well, close calls and death, they're hard to deal with. Close calls, you just come down and you get super drunk, but or you lose your wife, or you lose your girlfriend because you have a lot of almost dying really can change you, and I think it changes people. I've had injuries, but just one, Glenn Flake saved my life in an avalanche just as I was pretty much dying. And yeah, it's a terrible way to go. And when you see that, when that happened to me, I even became more vocal, perhaps down in the lift line in the mornings at powder days, or when people are down there with their girlfriend, their buddy, or some people just with smiles and oh, this is going to be so great. And you're like, well, yeah, it is, but I hope you know what happens when it goes wrong. It's basically my philosophy is to make sure you be really sure you want to be there, and don't go all the time. You don't have to you don't need to go have a first track perfect run every day, or go ski a steep, you don't need to do 50 runs, I don't know. Choose your battles and realize that it is a little bit of a battle, even if it's a fun battle, and maybe it is lighthearted and it is a good time, but that mountain's not playing with you sometimes, You might be playing with the mountain, but they're not playing with you.
So some quite sobering thoughts there from that chap. So he's a little bit underselling himself. So he's one of the more famous extreme skiers that are still alive today. And to bear in mind, what he considers extreme and what he doesn't consider extreme are probably very different to what I would consider to be extreme and not extreme. So where they were skiing on the Italian side of Mont Blanc, they were skiing down the Tula Glacier. So it's easily lift accessed, and that's one of the problems with it. It's easily accessed, but you're immediately onto heavily crevassed, quite steep terrain. And the fact that a lot of people go skiing there is neither here nor there. The risk is still there. And that's one of the things about human behavior. When we see other people, it makes us feel safer. So very unfortunate for this accident to happen. But there's a few sort of takeaway points there from Nate. He's sort of saying that you don't have to go and ski steep lines every day. You can easily have just as much fun skiing on sort of 20-25 degree slopes with your friends, doing laps, having a bit of a laugh, and you're going to go back to your car at the end of the day, and sort of having had a great experience. Whereas if you keep pushing the big lines and keep chasing it, you're going to get caught short one of the days, and it'll be when you least expect it as well, like what happened here. Okay, so the next video we've got is a little bit from a chap that's helping to develop some new Avalanche kind of. It's more to do with behavioral models and how we can recognize sort of what's going on in the backcountry and how we can try to steer ourselves from going in that direction.
My name's Jordi Hendricks. I'm here at Montana State University. I head up the Snow and Avalanche Lab over in Earth Sciences, and I've been here about 5 years now. The project that we're calling Ski Tracks is a project that we've been running for 2 years now, and it's designed to collect crowdsourced information of where people move in the backcountry, and at the same time have survey-based information about who they are and how they made decisions in the backcountry. And the work that I'm doing on the Tracks project is with a social scientist called Professor Jerry Johnson. And his background is in political science. He's spent his whole career looking at political decision making, and now he's applying that to the snow safety side of things. That collaboration allows me to expand my traditional kind of geophysical approach to snow science into a connected snow science research that allows me to look at both snow factors of snow safety, but also about how people make decisions. So what we're doing in this work is we're integrating surveys, so surveys about who people are and about how they make decisions. Once we get that, we will bounce you back a survey. That survey is now a very short survey, but really focuses on how did you make decisions. And what we can see when we've got all that information, we've got who you are, where you went, and who you were with, and how you made decisions. And that really completes the picture about how decisions are being made in the backcountry and gives us an insight into the type of terrain you're using and how you're choosing to make those terrain choices. And then we can extract a whole lot of really critical variables from that track. So we can pull out things like how much of your day did you spend on slopes above 30 degrees? What aspect were you on? Based on the forecast, which we also pull, we can then look and see how much of your time was on wind-loaded slopes versus lee slopes. Was that the zone that was of most concern, or were you mostly skiing aspects of least concern? And how did that change during the day? And how did it change with different groups? But increasingly I was seeing people that were dying that had a lot of that snow science knowledge, that had already found out and had read the literature and had worked out and done a number of courses and worked professionally and understood arguably a good amount of snow science knowledge. And yet they were making really bad decisions. And I strongly believe that if we can better understand how people make decisions with snow science knowledge, that we can make a bigger impact in terms of fatalities than we can just by looking at, say, how crystals form in the snowpack. We need to know that, but we also need to know how we can make decisions. And that part is the part that's really had relatively less attention over the last 100 years or so of snow science research.
Yeah, so some interesting research that's going on with human behavior in snow science. So when I first started out in the backcountry, taking people ski touring or just ski touring myself, it was all about the snow crystals, how snow crystals form and how they react within the snowpack. And then you think to yourself, well, that's fantastic. So now I know all about depth hoar, I know about surface hoar, I know about, how the slopes get wind loaded, but I don't really know what to do with all that information. It was all about that. So a lot of avalanche education nowadays is focused heavily on human behavior and how we behave in this terrain. And you have to be able to recognize that there's something that's going on with the behavior as well. So you need to sometimes take a step back and go, oh, hang on a minute. Do we really need to be going up that? Can't we go over there and go around? Or do we need to ski this slope? We recognized the slope earlier on when we were doing our planning. We definitely said that we weren't going to ski this, but because it's a beautiful day and there's other people skiing it, you might get drawn into skiing it. So recognizing that, what's safe and what isn't before you even go out is really where it's at, okay? And helping you with that'll help you with your decision making whilst you're out on the ground. So a little kind of introduction to human factors then. So if the goal of avalanche education is to reduce avalanche deaths, then the challenge to the avalanche educator goes beyond simply imparting information. The challenge is to encode knowledge into simple, easily applied decision tools that can compete with the heuristic traps described here. So one of the things that we're going to introduce you to, and I've already started that, is the evaluator tool. So we're going to have a good look at the evaluator tool in one of our later presentations, and then we're going to use it physically when we're out in the field on our field day, and it can really help you make some decisions both before you go out and actually by looking at what's going on with the weather and the terrain whilst you're actually out on your excursion in the backcountry, and it'll give you an idea of whether you should go or you shouldn't go. So heuristics. So first of all, hold on, what's a heuristic? So a heuristic is a mental shortcut that is usually right, but sometimes wrong. When you're wrong, we have fallen into a heuristic trap. So a heuristic would be, I'll give you an example of driving home, okay? So let's say you drive to and from work, and you've been driving to and from work, same route every day for 5 years, and it's an hour journey. I can guarantee that sometimes you'll get home and you'll be parking your car up and you'll go, how did I get home? I don't, I've been on autopilot the whole time. So that's an example of heuristics working well for you, okay? So every day we make thousands of decisions, and if we had to actually mentally think about every single one of those decisions, I think we'd be quite tired. So what your subconscious does, it makes those decisions for you based on what's happened in the same situation before. Okay, so sounds great, doesn't it? Sort of driving home is a perfect example. We don't really have to put too much effort into it, kind of pay a little bit of peripheral attention to what's going on with the traffic, pedestrians, whatever, but you get home nice and safe. The problem is in the backcountry, if you applied that same sort of subconscious thinking, so we have to really consciously drag it out of our subconscious, things change all the time. So you could go on a ski tour one day and it's perfect, you're skiing, up to your waist in powder. The next day you go there, there's no powder and it's rock hard. It's all the snow has been blown away onto another slope, and because of that difference, that's just a very simple sort of difference to notice. But your brain subconsciously thinks it was the same as the last time you were there, so it'll be like, oh yeah, I cruised up the ridge on the right there, then I just skied down the face, perfect. Okay, but what about if, for example, we've got a really shallow snowpack and it's been really cold for a long period of time, which, funny old thing, it is in the Rockies, and you've got a weak layer within the snowpack. So the last time you skied there, could have been, when it was a slightly warmer temperature for a longer period of time and the snowpack's nice and consolidated. You'll now go and ski that line, and you release or you squish a weak layer within the snowpack and it releases the whole slope. But your brain's thinking, well, it was, last time I was there, it was fine. Okay. So it's just something to bear in mind, and we're going to have a little look at a few things that can affect you. So although we recognize human factors as a thing, and it's connected to other things in our decision-making process. So the first one on human factors is you need to consider the group. Okay, so the group that you're traveling in. So a lot of this research on heuristic traps came from a paper written by a chap called Ian McCammon in 2004. And it's a paper called Heuristic Traps in Recreational Avalanche Accidents. So it's only about 10 pages, and I definitely recommend that you Google it after this presentation and have a little look. And the paper itself is just recognizing some of the heuristic traps that are more common that people fall into. So the actual paper itself was written on, I think it's around about 700 avalanche accidents that range from users that are absolute beginners all the way through to mountain guides and professional users, and how, you know, the risk, given the same sort of situation, how the risk is different between different groups or within those accidents. Okay, so it's quite interesting because I'll give you an example. When someone's familiar with an area, so let's say a mountaineering professional, so let's say a mountain guide is familiar with an area, they put themselves in the same risk category as an absolute beginner. So their level of exposure to risk is the same as someone that doesn't know any better. Okay, so that's just a little snippet from the paper. It's well worth a read. Okay, so they talk briefly about group size and how group size can affect the thinking of everyone within the group, and especially the leader. And there is an optimum sort of size for groups. So too few people and too many people, and you end up making quite bad decisions as a group together. So the optimum number was like 4 or 5 within a group is the absolute perfect. So a few things to consider. So the group heuristics, so how the group's thinking, the attitude. So what's the attitude of someone before they go out? So you could be totally committed to a line. You are skiing that line come hell nor high water. So the attitude of someone can have a massive difference on the outcome of the day. Situational awareness. So are people paying attention to what's going on around them whilst they're in the backcountry? So the forecast says one thing, and bear in mind it is only a forecast. It's a look forward into what possibly could be happening with the weather, but what's actually happening there and then. So I've been involved in rescuing people out of quite a nasty avalanche because they weren't paying attention to slopes warming up throughout the day, and they left later than they should have. And unfortunately, a slope triggered above them by a cornice dropping off, whatever. And the avalanche hit the group and unfortunately knocked one of them over a cliff. So, you know, sort of paying attention to actually physically what's going on the ground as opposed to what the forecast, and did the two marry up? Your judgment, so what the group's kind of experiences. So judgment, you know, comes from experience. So what's the experience within the group, and how are they? How is the group managing the current situation? And one of the biggest things that we're constantly battling against is uncertainty. So the only thing that we can do to try to kind of reduce the uncertainty is plan, is to get as much information as you can, looking at the weather, looking at the avalanche forecast, looking at maps, looking at guidebooks, looking at blogs, looking at the Mountain Information Network. Has someone been there the day before? And by gathering as much information as we can become less uncertain about what we can expect when we're out on the ground. And also, given all of those factors, you can choose somewhere that's appropriate given those particular conditions. So, for example, if the avalanche category is, just off the top of my head, if the avalanche category is a category 4, you're not necessarily going to go and ski a slope that's more than 30 degrees. Okay, so an avalanche category of 4 means that natural avalanches are going to happen. And if they're going to happen on those slopes. So you're not going to go and ski those slopes. You might go to somewhere that the slope only ever gets to 20 degrees. Okay, you don't go outside, you don't come out the tree line, or you just decide, well, the avalanche category is 4. I think I'll stay home and drink coffee and call it a day. Okay. So some of the heuristic traps that we talk about and that were sort of identified in the paper I spoke about earlier by Ian McCammon. So the first one is familiarity. So being familiar with an area, you get used to the area. You don't have to pay so much attention to the map. You might have a quick look at the avalanche forecast the day before and go, it's looking fine. You might not pay attention to the smaller details because you've been there hundreds of times before. But actually, every time you go into the backcountry and go on a ski tour or on your sled, or you're walking into an ice climb, you need to pay attention. You need to look at it as if it was the first time that you've ever been there. So if you've never been somewhere before, you're worried about getting lost, let alone being avalanched. So you really do get your head in the map, and you'll start to recognize some steeper slopes, and you're like, oh, that's actually quite a steep slope on the right there. And there's quite a good whilst I'm on the subject, there's quite a good app called Fat Map, where you can put a terrain overview, and it'll give you an idea of which slopes are, just by looking at an amber or a red, which slopes are over 30 degrees. So you can kind of pay real attention to how steep the slopes are. But if you just kind of switch off, I've been here loads of times, it'll be fine. It won't be fine. Eventually you're going to get caught out. You're going to catch yourself out. Okay. So just bear that in mind. Just every time you go and do a ski tour, you might have been there 10 times before. Look at it as if it's the first time you've been there. So acceptance. So this is more kind of being involved within a group, and it's quite closely linked with the expert halo. So within a group, something's wrong, but you don't feel that you can speak up because you feel like you're the least experienced person within the group. So-and-so's done a lot more ski touring, a lot more ski mountaineering, whatever it might be, than you have. So you're like, oh, do I speak up? It doesn't feel right, but maybe I should say something, but I don't. So acceptance is a real problem. And what I do with the people that I go out into the backcountry with, that I take ski touring, I'll always try to, in this day and age, I'll Zoom them, and we'll have a look at some maps and guidebooks over Zoom, and we'll talk about the terrain that we're going to, and we'll speak about every different section of that ski tour that we're going to do. So, we'll break it down, and we'll go, right, this is where I see the most risk being is this particular section. So everyone feels like they're involved in the decision making. So if you've been involved in the decision making in the planning phase, you should feel comfortable in speaking up. So it could be something as simple as you've noticed that from the ski tour planning, that a certain slope is more than 35 degrees, and that it's wind loaded on the particular day that you're going to go skiing. So you get up there, but actually you see other people skiing down it. And so as a group, you're like, oh, group think once again, oh yeah, let's just ski down there and let's do a lap on there and back up. But actually you should have recognized it in the plan and gone, well, no, we shouldn't be skiing that slope because of this. We decided that we wouldn't go and ski anything on this side. So as a group, you can be like, oh yeah, fair one. We did speak about it as a group. Whereas if it's one individual making the decision, then it doesn't always work out that way. I'll give you a very quick example of that. So last year, I took a group of individuals out on their very first ski tour, and where we were kind of skiing was about 25 degrees through some really quite small trees. We're having a bit of a laugh, and a group of people came up, and they looked like a fairly beginner group, and there was someone that was in charge, and they were definitely in charge. And they said to me, "Oh, can we get to the top of this ridge up this way?" So what had happened is they'd followed our ski tracks all the way up to where we were. And I said, no, you're better off just going back down the way you've come. And then you'll notice that on your right-hand side, as you're going down, you'll see another up track. If you follow that up track, that'll take you to where you want to be. And the guy was like, oh yeah, what I'll do is I'll just cut across onto that slope and I'll go across through the trees and get across. And I said to him, well, you might not want to go up through those trees because it's really steep and there's some cliff bands in there. Oh, it'll be all right. That's what the guy said to me, it'll be all right. And I said to him, well, it'd be much better going back down the way you've come. So in this particular instance, the group was fully accepting what the leader was saying, and just following along, when actually if they'd all been involved in the plan, they could have realized that, and then got the map out, that they've gone too far and that they should have gone left earlier on in the ski tour. And once again, that brings us on to the next one, commitment. Okay, so this is a really strong heuristic. So to go ski touring anywhere from Calgary, you're looking at an hour and a half to 2 hours of driving. So K Country is probably one of the closest areas that you could get out ski touring. So you kind of book the day off work. You've got all your friends lined up. They've all booked the day off as well. The weather's looking good from the forecast, and you get out there. You're driving, and you're noticing that as you're driving, you're seeing a lot of avalanche debris on some slopes. As you're driving down through K Country, like, oh, there's a lot of avalanche debris on these slopes as you're driving down. So you kind of just, it's in the back of your mind. And then you kind of get to where you're going and you park up. But actually the temperature is a lot warmer than it was forecast for. and you're seeing some avalanche debris or some sloughs, that kind of where the snow is warming up and rolling down the mountain. You're seeing evidence of it whilst you're looking up. So what do? You've booked the day off, all your friends are there. We'll just go and have a look. We'll just go up a little bit, and if we don't like it, we can turn around. No, what you should really be doing is going, well, do you know what? Things are a lot warmer than we thought they'd be. What was our plan B? So hopefully you've got a plan B in your back pocket. Right, come on then, let's just get our driving pants on and drive another 2 hours, and we'll go up to the Highway 93 North where the elevation's a little bit higher, or whatever. You've got a plan B. But having a plan B is going to help you not get sucked into or fully committed to that plan A. Okay, and then I'll bring you back to my last point, which was the chap that went the wrong way on the ski tour. So human nature is such that if you've made your mind up, generally you've made your mind up, and I'm going to make that happen. Okay, especially when you've got an audience. What you actually need to do is just say, right, I've got it wrong. We've gone too far. We're just going to nip back down this track, and then we're going to go up. We actually went past it. It's only 200 meters back down the track. So kind of fessing up and owning it is going to keep you out of trouble. And what's a little bit of embarrassment if you feel embarrassed compared to digging your friends out of an avalanche or falling over a cliff band? It's very, very little, isn't it? Okay. So this next one brings us on to that point I was just talking about, is the expert halo. Okay. So it's been something from this study that they've noticed is that people that are in charge and they seemingly know what they're doing, people defer their decision making to that person. Okay. So in this particular instance, this chap had a group of beginners with him, and I think he'd probably been done like maybe 3 ski tours himself. But he's the person that's done the ski tours. He's the expert. So everyone else hasn't got a clue. They're just following along, and they're deferring all of their decision making to that one person. Once again, that's going to get you into trouble if you do that. So if you ever feel like you're in a group and there's a definite leader, or even worse, you've kind of tagged onto a group, so it's a friend of a friend, and you've ended up, skiing with other people you don't know. I think that it's just best to, especially in the backcountry, because your life is, at risk here, as is everyone else's, as it always is when you move in the backcountry when there's snow on the ground. There's an element of risk. Just own it. If you don't like something, say something. And if that leader is any worth their salt, they'll listen to what you're saying, and they'll kind of, you'll be able to have a group decision and a group discussion about what's actually physically happening on the ground, and do we think it's safe to either go up or ski down something. Okay. I'll give you another quick example of this from last winter. I was out ski touring with a group, and a group of people could just ski down basically an avalanche track. So they'd ski down this avalanche track, and the last person that was skiing down was a beginner, and she said to the group leader, she was like, all I heard was, but I still don't understand why it was safe to ski down that avalanche track in today's conditions. Can you explain it to me? And the guy was like, well, yeah, because of this, and this. And I was listening to it, and I was sort of like, well, that doesn't make any sense what you're saying. And what it kind of boiled down to was the fact that the guy had been there before and skied down that line, and he was talking about, but the wind was doing this and that, and I was like, no, that's fully loaded. Where you've just skied down is, I didn't say this, it's fully loaded. And I just kind of skied past the girl at the back there and just said, keep asking questions, and just skied off, left that little bomb for them to discuss. So, openly discussing and maybe even questioning, and hopefully the leader will question their own decision making and be like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't ski down that. And maybe a little bit of reflection is what's required. Okay. This brings us on to our next sort of heuristic. This is 2 heuristics here. So the first one we're going to talk about is scarcity. I'm going to put this into a supermarket context for you. Okay. So you walk into the supermarket and your favorite drink's Coca-Cola. Okay. And Coca-Cola is in short supply anyway, right? For some reason. So you walk in there and there's a pallet of Coca-Cola, sort of, 12 packs on there as you walk in. And there's a sign on it saying, limited time offer, buy one, get one free. And you're like, nice one, I'm going to have some of that. So you pick up 8 packs. But what you don't know is actually the supermarket at the back have got pallets and pallets and pallets of it. So they're creating an environment of scarcity. So you're like, oh, I best get it before it's all gone. So we can apply this to the backcountry. So after it's just snowed quite heavily, there's a saying, no friends on a powder day. So you get off the lift, see the bottom losers, and you just nail it straight off the lift, and you're straight into the steep stuff, getting those first lines in. Okay. You're really quite vulnerable when after a storm when that happens. So generally, especially in a resort, you're going to get good snow conditions straight after a storm. So straight after a storm, clouds have all gone, blue skies, boom, I'm going to have it. Okay. Be a little bit careful about that. You know, you really ought to, and this is not what you want to hear. You need to wait sort of 24 to 48 hours for that snowpack to settle down a little bit before you start to ski it. And even then, it's going to take some consideration before you ski it. Another way that this can happen is that you've kind of done your bit of research where you're skiing is less than 30 degrees and you're having a great time. You're doing laps, okay? So you're skiing down, and of course you can't ski over the same tracks twice because that's just not it's just not the way it's done. So you're skiing down, and then you put your tracks into the right, and you ski down again, do another lap. And then what's happening is you're not paying attention, but the slope's getting steeper. You're getting a little bit more confident. And then before you know it, you're on a slope that's just over 30 degrees, boom, avalanche. Okay, so just being aware of the situation and not getting too carried away with, all that fresh powder, which is just obviously amazing to ski. So just be a little bit careful. Okay, so tracks and social proof, which is the next two on, they're actually very similar in the heuristics. So social proof is that others are doing it, and if they're doing it, then it must be okay. They're not getting avalanched. It must be all right. I just want to bring you back to that snowmobile back at the beginning of the presentation. So he wasn't the first person that gone up that slope. Tracks were already in. Okay, so that social proof doesn't prove anything. Okay, you need to make your own decisions based on what you know. Okay, so us as the human being, as the human animal, if you like, we like interaction with other people. Okay, so we feel safer when there's more people around. So if you're in the middle of some big massive mountain expanse and you're on your own, you feel a little bit vulnerable and a little bit kind of it's a little bit definitely out there, having a great time probably, but it's a little bit but then you see another group of people, you're like, there's other people out here, I don't feel quite so bad now, not quite so alone. And this is the case with social proof. So you just need to be careful when other people are around, and this goes with group size as well. So just being aware of how you act and other people act when they're you might be a little bit more emboldened when there's more people around as well. It's not an accident that underneath lift lines on the mountain, that's where all the mogul runs are. So people like showing off on the moguls underneath lift lines. You ever thought about that? Why are the mogul runs under the lift lines? And that's back to people other people and like to show off as well. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so that's just an introduction to human factors, and I definitely recommend looking up that 10-page research paper. So heuristic traps in recreational avalanche accidents by Ian McCammon, around about 2004, I think it was made. So moving forward, so groupthink, we had a brief chat about this. So within a group, not rocking the boat, keeping the group harmony, don't want to speak up. But if you do speak up, everyone should be totally open to listening to what you're saying. And if they're in any way hostile, kind of, I skied this last week, just keep digging. Well, you skied it last week, but it snowed 2 meters of snow since last week. I don't think it's going to be the same slope that we skied, obviously the same slope, but not the same conditions. And then if anything, hopefully it'll promote some group discussion, okay? And then another thing with groups is that you can talk yourself into a right pickle. So you're called risky shift. So as a group, you kind of like, you get a bit braver, the more and more you kind of go out together. I know we can do this, we can go further, we can go longer, we can ski steeper. And you might actually end up talking yourself into a situation that it's, as a group, you feel emboldened, but as an individual, you probably wouldn't make that same decision, okay? So just bear it in mind within a group, especially if you're with all your mates. One of the things that I've got to be really cognizant if I go out with my friends is like, who's actually paying attention to the conditions? We're all talking about what we've been doing recently, and we're out ski touring, and it's like, who's so everyone thinks everyone else is paying attention to the conditions, and no one is. So it's just bearing that in mind, okay? So looking at the attitude or the mindset of the group. So as a recreationist, what is the attitude you have when going into the backcountry? So some good things that can be good. So be mindful of changing conditions. So that could be the weather, the snowpack, or the group. So just keeping an eye on it, even if you're not in charge, it's just always good to be making your own decisions and then bringing that into the group's decisions as well. So just what's going on? Is it warming up faster than we thought it would? Is there a storm coming? Is it snowing really quite heavily? Is it really windy? And are the slopes that we're about to ski down are getting wind loaded as we're speaking? And it's quite obvious if that's happening. Okay. So not being fixed on a specific plan. Remember I said about commitment. So having a few options available to you. So if you get to where you're going and it's not working out, then you can always just sort of, no, let's just sort of go drive a bit further down the road and we'll have a look at somewhere else, because it's a different aspect. It's facing the other direction, or the winds aren't, loading up with the snow, whatever it might be. And sort of always being available for turning back around as well. So if for example, you're breaking trail at the front, you're moving across the slope and there's big shooting cracks coming off the front of your skis, you might be like, "Ooh, hang on a minute. This snowpack's not really feeling particularly like I don't want to cross it. It's got a lot of energy. I'm worried that there's a slab avalanche is about to happen. So get back in your tracks and go back the way you've come. Don't be afraid of doing that. I've done that on more than one occasion. And as long as you don't sort of beat yourself up over it, it's fine. You're going to go home at the end of the day, and that's really what we want, isn't it? So here's some bad things that we need to try and avoid. So only there to ride big lines or complete the specific route. So being absolutely fixed and committed on that one line is going to get you into a spot of bother. All right. So just be open to changing your mind. Don't be so fixed on just skiing that one thing or climbing that one thing. Okay. And then, like I said, don't feel let down in the event that you have to change your mind or go somewhere else. This can be a bit more difficult if you're being paid to take someone. So as a mountain guide, your guests or your clients have got some real expectations. So you kind of, from my experience, you've got to kind of drip feed it in as you're going along, sort of be more vocal about what it is that you're seeing that you don't like. So instead of it being a decision that suddenly plonked on the group, right, we're not going any further because I don't like what's going on up here. Along the way, you've been going, well, do you know what? It's a lot windier than we thought it would be. Look at all the snow that's getting blown off that ridge onto where we're headed. And you're just verbalizing what it is that you're thinking. So before you know it, everyone's like, oh, this isn't a good idea. And everyone's made the decision to turn around, not just plonked on them. The decision's arbitrary, okay? And then, of course, goes ahead in spite of the bulletin or warning signs. I can do this, I'll be careful. So when we are going to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but the avalanche kind of danger scale that ranges from numerically 1 to 5, but actually it's kind of low, moderate, considerable, high, very high. People don't go skiing generally when it's high or very high, so 4 or 5, but people are happy enough to go skiing when it's considerable, which is a 3. So if you just use the numbers, 3 is in the right middle of a scale. How bad can it be? But using the word considerable is actually quite serious. So if I was to say to you, if you were to cross that road, there's a considerable chance you're going to get hit by a truck. You might go, I think I'm going to take the bridge. I'm going to walk over. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so most avalanche accidents happen in that considerable range. So just being mindful of what the bulletin is actually saying. So just because it's considerable doesn't mean that you can't go. You've just got to be a lot more careful and do a lot more research before you commit to going to ski something that's over 30 degrees when it's a considerable avalanche danger. Okay. Situational awareness. So as I was saying, with me and my mates, when we go out, we've got to be careful we're doing this. We're not sort of assuming someone else is doing it. So always paying attention to your surroundings once you're actually out in the backcountry doing whatever you're doing. So paying attention to the weather. Is it changing? The snowpack. Is it what you were expecting? So from all of the research that you've done. The terrain, what's going on right where you are, but is there anything above you need to worry about? Or anything below you need to worry about? So are there any terrain traps? The time of day, okay, so you might think to yourself, well, how's that important? But you don't particularly want to be skiing down through some really sort of thick trees in the dark, okay? So you need to pay attention to what time you're leaving what your pace is, and don't just keep pushing it. Okay, so give yourself a definite cutoff time. Right, by 1:30 in the afternoon, I want to be on the ridgeline. If you get to the ridgeline and it's, or you're only halfway up to the ridgeline and it's 1:30, you might be like, we're not going to be getting down to the car before it gets dark. So let's just turn around now and just get down to the car before it gets dark. And then just sort of looking at the group dynamics. How's everyone doing within the group? Are some people struggling? Are some people a little bit concerned about the steepness of the slope that you're about to ski? Just bearing that in mind, and don't just sort of pushing through it, because one thing you don't want to happen in the backcountry is for someone to have an accident. So someone to fall over or ski into a tree, or injure, or sort of ACL injuries are the main ones for skiing. So trying to get someone out who's just torn their ACL is not something you ever want to go through. So just being aware of that, and also the ability. So someone tells you they're really good skier, they're a friend of a friend. Oh yeah, come along. Yeah, we'll have a great day. And then actually, when you start skiing down, they can't ski. That's happened to me on more than 10 occasions actually. Probably last winter alone, when people are kind of saying that they can and they actually can't. So just bearing that in mind. Some things to help us out. So we've got the evaluator slope evaluation card. So we're gonna bring that in, as I said, later on in the course. So it's excellent for the snowpack evaluation, the weather, and the terrain. What about the group and the time of day? As I said, you need to keep monitoring it and factor it into your decision making. It is a little bit harder to kind of get to grips with, because you're mainly dealing with yourself, unless you're used to dealing with groups of people and looking after other people in sort of adverse conditions. Then it does take a little bit more effort to kind of put to the forefront in your mind. Judgment. So judgment comes with experience and reflection. So it's quite important that you analyze your day when you're finished. So yeah, we all want to head down the pub and have a pint and go, oh, that was awesome, we're shredding some big lines. But actually, whilst you're doing that, take some time to, as a group, or even as mates, whatever, just sort of have a look at the day, go back over it and go, right, did we do, what would I have done differently if I could do that again? And I do this all the time. So after I've dropped my clients off, I'll be driving home, got a couple of hours in the car. I'm just thinking about, what would I do next time? What would I differently next time? Because everyone's different. So every client that I go out skiing with is different. They've got different take on the day. They've got different fitness abilities, skiing abilities, and you have to make decisions based on those things. Trying to get that information out of them at the start of the day is a bit of an art as well. So figuring out what it is that they actually want compared to what you think their level of or their ability is. So reflecting on the day, and then of course about the route itself. Do I think that I should have skied that slope today? And I'm not gonna lie to you, especially as I was gaining the experience to become a mountain guide, I definitely skied and climbed a lot of things that I shouldn't have, and I definitely think I got away with it on more than one occasion. Okay, so actually just thinking about that and adding it into the bank of information, so you can draw on that experience when you are thinking about what to do. What do I do now? Which way are we going to go? Sort of thing. So critically reflect on the day, both pre and post trip. What was the most challenging decision of the day? What could I have done better? Was the risk appropriate for the group? And did I manage uncertainty appropriately? And then don't rush the process. It takes time, and it does take a lot of mileage to gain this experience. As we said, expectations of the course. You are not going to be absolute backcountry legends by the time you finish this course. You can have a good idea of how to plan a ski tour and how to stay safe. But it's going to take experience. You're going to have to build on that. And you never there's no end in sight. You just get more efficient at it. And, the process isn't as daunting. You're constantly doing it all the time. Okay. So uncertainty. So it's a constant in backcountry travel. So things that is always uncertain is the snowpack. The terrain is always the same, so it doesn't change. Okay, so that's one thing you can rely on, and you can base your decisions on the terrain itself. So kind of the easiest way of putting it is it 30 degrees or more? Okay, and if it is, you really do need to consider how you're going to gain the high point in your ski tour. But even if it's lower than 30 degrees, you still got to do that same process. It's just less likely to avalanche. Okay, so that's the point, likely still uncertain, you've still got to make those decisions for yourself. The ability and perhaps the attitude of the group, we've spoken about that. So just being aware of the ability and the attitude. So the attitude could be, we want to go and ski some steep lines. The ability could be, I can only ski green runs. So the two don't really marry up. And then the effect of the change in weather, and then, you know, where it is you're skiing within that terrain. So you're skiing in the north, in the south, what elevation band are you skiing in? Because that affects the amount of snow that you're gonna encounter as well. So as I said earlier on in the presentation, you know, we try to reduce our uncertainty by getting your head in the books, in the maps, guidebooks, speaking to people, looking at the min reports, avalanche forecast, blogs. You're going to get as much information as you can to make up an idea of, you know, what it's going to be like on that ski tour itself. And then, you know, like kind of FatMap and Google Earth, you know, you can put the map into 3D and move it around, get right and close onto slopes. And, you know, on Google Maps is brilliant. You can so take Chickadee Valley, for example, you have a look at that on Google Maps. You can physically see the avalanche paths. So even though the map's in summer, you can see where the avalanches run down in the winter. So you can look at that and go, oh, well, you know, that terrain's obviously more than 30 degrees right there. And you can, you know, it's very easy to find that information. So dealing with the uncertainty, so the change of trip plan. So obviously having a few kind of different ski tours up your sleeves that you can go and do. And then you can always step back, and we're going to talk about, there's a few things here. So simple terrain versus challenging terrain. We're going to have a little look at that later on in our presentations. It's how we can classify terrain into the likelihood of it being avalanched in that terrain. So by stepping back, you reduce the consequences. So you move from challenging terrain to simple terrain. Then it's less likely to avalanche. Okay. So greater uncertainty requires a greater margin of safety. So reducing heuristic errors or making informed decisions, as I said, you know, there's lots of things that we need to we need to bear in mind. But when we're pre-trip planning, I tend to use a systematic decision making sort of matrix of what it is that I'm looking for. So I go through the same things every time that I plan a ski tour, and the evaluator card does that perfectly for you. So it asks some questions, and then you answer the questions, and then given the score from those answers, gives you a kind of green, amber, red, and you know that's fairly obvious. Go or don't go. Okay. So using lots of different sites to gain that information once again is what's going to help you. Okay. So making a decision pre-trip. So we need to be looking at the public bulletin, using our evaluator card, Avalanche Canada forecasters blog. So you can go into Avalanche Canada and have a look at all the resources that are on there. We're actually going to have a good look around the Avalanche Canada website in one of our presentations. So we'll physically do that. Then looking at the Mountain Information Network. So we'll have a look at these MIM reports and see what they say and what information we can gain from those reports. And then looking at mountain conditions reports. So looking at the ACMG website, and some guides post on there about, you know, a recent trip report that they did to say Rogers Pass, give you an idea of what the avalanche conditions are like, the snow conditions are like in Rogers Pass. And obviously talking to people, you know, so you might know some people that have been to an area recently, and that can really help you out with your planning. So once again, in the field, we can use the evaluator card, and we're actually going to do that whilst we're out on the ground. So we'll get the card out and we'll look at the terrain and we'll go, right, what do you think? Would you go? Wouldn't you go? And we'll actually do that. So is the snow unstable? It's a difficult question to answer. So things to consider. And I've already been talking about it quite a lot so far. Is this steep enough to avalanche? That's the first question you need to ask yourself. So getting good with sort of estimating slope angle, you need to practice that. And then we're going to give you some things that you can do to measure slope angle physically on the field day. What's the worst that could happen on this terrain? So you need to think about the consequences and what's the worst thing that can happen. So if, for example, you're ski touring and you're moving across, but there's a river next to you on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and you've got a steep slope above you, that's a terrain trap. And you've got a steep slope above you, which is going to require some management. So it could be something as easy as, across this section, we're just going to move one at a time. So you're reducing the risk by reducing the amount of people that are huddled together. So one at a time, or you might just say, right, moving across this section, we're just going to spread out 20 meters apart and we're going to move across. And then as we get across back into the trees, we can come back together again. So if you're left with uncertainty, then increase your margin of safety. So making decisions in the field. So some things that are often neglected. We're going to have a good look at all of these kind of things in one of our next presentations. So things that often get neglected are where the sun's warming slopes. So just because it's sunny isn't a great thing all the time, especially when it comes to skiing. We need to pay attention to which slopes are getting warmed because they're becoming unstable as the day progresses. Terrain traps, kind of already spoken about that one. Talking about where the wind is depositing snow. And then obviously watching out for steep slopes above you. So you might be on a 25-degree slope, but you could be on a less of an angle slope on a steeper slope. So there could be a huge expanse of snow above you, but where you are is okay, but what's above you isn't. It could be steeper than 30 degrees. So secondary avalanches on the same slope. All right. So just because the slope's avalanched doesn't mean that it's safe to keep going on that slope, because eventually, if you're on a big slope and you go across avalanche debris, the slope's still probably the same steepness, but it just hasn't avalanched yet. And then just identifying weak layers within the snowpack. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in future presentations. So some good behaviors that we need to try to reinforce. So communication, talking to each other all the time. Leadership. So there definitely needs to be a leader within the group, but that leader needs to also pay attention to everyone else and what their thoughts are as well. Having a bit of patience. Okay, so as I said, kind of waiting 24 to 48 hours after a storm is a good example. Having patience, waiting for it to settle down before you head out onto those steeper lines. Then having the discipline to do that. So being disciplined just to wait. Okay. So human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge. So Plato, obviously knew what we're talking about a few thousand years ago. So there's an interesting statistic for you. So 93% of all avalanche accidents, the victims or someone is in the victim's party triggered the avalanche. So 93% of avalanches are triggered by the people that were in the avalanche. It's quite a sobering statistic, that I think. So when we're worried about sort of naturally occurring avalanches way above you up on the mountainside, that only accounts for 7% of accidents. So most people cause their own avalanches. So quickly look at levels of competency. So when you're a beginner and you're first heading out into the backcountry, surfing's a perfect example here. But for us, ski touring, when you're a beginner, you do need more instruction and training to kind of complement your learning. But then as you start to build on that, you get more sort of more avalanche education. So your AST1 course, AST2 course, which I definitely recommend. You then start moving into the intermediate, where you're happy to go out with your friends. You're still taking instruction, still a little bit unsure, asking questions. And then as you move into the kind of got a good few seasons under your belt, thousands of ski tours under your belt, you start to become the expert or the master. I don't know about that, but you should still be open to learning. This is a never-ending kind of learning experience. And every year, I try and get myself booked onto to at least a couple of courses to further my knowledge, because I don't know everything, and I'm always open to learning more. And of course, avalanche education and avalanche research in general is becoming a lot more. There's a lot more resources and funds available for organisations to do research. And then, of course, with the technology that we've got at our disposal now, I can guarantee you within 10 or 20 years, you'll be able to get your iPhone, look at a slope through the camera, and it'll show you on the slope where the hotspots are and where to avoid. That's not too far in the distant future with the technology that we've got. Okay. So in the immortal words of Master Yoda, you want to know the difference between a master and a beginner? The master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried. Okay. So don't be put off by kind of near misses in the backcountry, as long as they're not too serious. You're going to gain experience from that. And as long as you keep reading and keep doing research and learning, hopefully you're going to start to avoid those mistakes. Okay. So thank you for your attention through this presentation. We've got another few presentations to go through. And if you've got any questions, then feel free to contact your instructor for the course, and they'll answer any questions from this particular presentation. Thank you.